Our focus on the mustard seed parable tends to be how something small grows up to be something that is the greatest of shrubs and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. It's a wonderful image how each one of us, as well as the church, can become something that nurtures and supports others. There's another aspect of Jesus' example that's worth exploring. A comparison with the well-known lore of cedars of Lebanon. The cedars of Lebanon was a well-known image of the kingdom of God, a towering tree whose strength cannot be missed. The redwoods of California would be the comparison that most Americans would use today. Jesus, however, points to the mustard shrub as his example for the kingdom of God. It is in some sense a parody of the cedars. No one would ever mistake a 10-foot mustard plant for a 100-foot cedar. It's like comparing a scrub oak with a redwood. Scrum oak or gamble oak grow to become either large shrubs or small trees. They are an important source of food for wandering and foraging animals, in part because they are drought tolerant, and they quickly reestablish themselves after a fire. But there's no mistaking scrub oaks for towering redwoods. There's nothing grand or glorious about them, and people who have them often don't want them. The mustard shrub is, for all intensive purposes, a weed. Jesus might have been standing near a bunch of them when he told the story. Were they impressive? Perhaps, but they were no cedars. Mustard shrubs were common plants found everywhere that Jesus went. See, everyone was looking for something huge to point towards the kingdom of God, looking up to the skies to find a towering cedar, but never finding one. In the process, people looked past the flourishing mustard shrubs. After all, they were just weeds. Brian Sofragan, a Lutheran pastor, says that as far as he knows, there are still no cedars growing in Israel, but there are a lot of mustard plants. He wrote, "Is God ruling now or not? Perhaps we are looking in the wrong places, staring up in the sky for tall trees instead of looking on the ground for common weeds. And maybe we do the same thing with people. I've heard it suggested that a weed is just a flower that's a victim of prejudice. This interpretation of the parable, God's rule is like a weed, is one that would certainly challenge and threaten the hearer's world of assumptions of the coming powerful kingdom of God. Yet when the seed of a weed is covered by cement, they seem to find a way to grow through the tiniest of cracks." I love that image. The kingdom of God is like a weed that finds a way to grow through the tiniest of cracks. What an ordinary and astonishing way to describe God's love breaking into the world. Meta Stamper similarly writes on Mark's version of the story that seems now to relate to our times. The passage as a whole emphasizes the hiddenness and smallness of the quiet beginnings of the kingdom, and also underscores the sense in which the sower does not make the kingdom happen by force of will. There's a deep truth here. But within the domination of the Romans and through years of abuse, it was hard for the people to see anything that God was doing. And yet Jesus insisted that God was not only doing, but was doing well for the whole, for the possibilities of the kingdom of God. Belief in that goodness of the kingdom of God requires hope. But in order to have that hope, we often need something or something to draw our attention to the possibilities of God's vision. We need access usually to connect to small insights and understandings in order to be enabled to do our part in making God's vision a reality. These parables worked because Jesus connected people to their world around them. There were no great cedars, but the mustard seed was prolific. Jesus drew attention to the unnoticed parts of the lives of people, what was found in their midst, but often ignored because they were seen as too small to be part of God's hope for the world. I wonder how Jesus might do this today. How might we all see God working towards justice and peace, and then add our voices, our actions into that vision and make it a reality? Thanks be to God.